Hi everyone, as it's World Book Day today, a couple of members of staff from around school have got together to create a video reading extracts from Mallory Blackman's Noughts and Crosses. This book is about racial prejudice amongst young people. We felt it's really important to read about relevant issues like this as we have to educate ourselves about the world we live in.
So, a note from the author, a book of love. Life is meaningless only if you allow it to be. Each of us has the power to give life meaning, to make our time and our bodies and our words into instruments of love and hope. Why love is losing hurts so much. We love to know that we are not alone. Radical superiority is a mere pigment of the imagination. Sephy is a cross and the daughter of one of the most powerful, ruthless men in the country. She is a member of the dark-skinned ruling class. Callum is a Nought, an inferior white citizen in a society controlled by the black crosses. A Nought, nothing. He is a colourless member of the underclass who were once slaves to the crosses. The plot tells a story of two very different families, and this is made clear in every way possible through the way they live, the way they are treated and the things they are allowed to do. The two have been friends since early childhood, but that's as far as it can go. Until the first steps are taken towards more social equality and a limited number of Noughts are allowed into cross schools, against a background of prejudice and distrust, intensely highlighted by a violent terrorist activity by Noughts. A romance builds between Sephy and Callum, a romance that is to lead to both them into trouble, danger. In their hostile, violent world, Noughts and crosses simply don't mix. But when Sephy and Callum's childhood friendship grows into a passionate love, they're determined to find a way for it to be together.
3. Sephy. I moved the cursor over to shut down and clicked, yawning as I waited for my PC to switch off. It seemed to be taking forever tonight. At last, there was a clunk and the screen went black. I pressed the button to switch off my monitor and switched off the loudspeakers. Now for a quick drink and then bed. First day of school tomorrow. I groaned at the thought. School! I'd see all my friends again. We'd have the usual conversations about the places we'd visited, the films we'd seen, the parties we'd posed at, and before long it would be like we'd never been away from school at all. The same old faces, the same old teachers, same old. But that wasn't strictly true, was it? At least tomorrow would be a bit different from the start of every other new term. 4 Noughts, including Callum, were starting at my school. Maybe he'd even be in my class. And if he wasn't, we were bound to share some lessons together. My best friend was going to attend my very own school. That one thought alone was enough to make me grin like a silly idiot. Please, God, let Callum be in my class.
I walked out of my room and headed along the landing. Callum in my class, that would be so great. I was looking forward to showing him the playing fields and the swimming pool, the gym and the music rooms, and the dining hall and the science labs. And I'd introduce him to all my friends. Once they got to know him, they'd think he was great, as I did. It was going to be wonderful. I crept down the stairs. As thirsty as I was, I didn't relish the prospect of running into Mother. She was so miserable. I couldn't understand it. I could still remember when Mother had been all smiles and hugs and jokes, but that was long ago and far away now, about 3 years ago. Since then, there had been a complete change. Her sense of humour had grown old and died before the rest of her, and these days her lips were turned down in a frown that was permanently carved into her skin.
I shook my head. If that's what growing old was all about, then I never wanted to grow old. At least Dad was still fun when he was around, which wasn't often. Every adult I met for the first time loved to tell me how great my dad was. He was so smart, so funny, so handsome, how he was destined to go all the way to the top. I'd like to discover those things about my dad for myself. A man with oily hands and a sweaty smell, who came to my mother and Dad's last dinner party, had spent the entire time with me talking about how Dad would be Prime Minister one day and how I must be so proud of him. I mean, that man could have won a gold medal at the international games for the most boring person in the world. Why on earth would I care about my dad becoming Prime Minister? I saw little enough of him as it was. If he became Prime Minister, I'd have to watch the telly just to remember what he looked like.
Those bleeding heart liberals in the Pangean economics community make me sick. They said we in this country had to open our doors to Noughts, so we did. They said we had to open our doors to recruiting Noughts into our police and armed forces, so we did. And they're still not satisfied. And as for the Liberation Militia, I thought letting a few blankers into our schools would spike their guns. I froze on the bottom step at the sound of Dad's bitterly angry voice. It wasn't enough. Now the Liberation Militia have had one of their demands met. They don't see why they can't have a few more. And then there'll be a few more after that. Another voice, Dad had a guess. Over my cold and rotting body, I knew granting even one of the Pangean EC's demands was a mistake. God spare us from liberals and blankers.
I winced at the venom in Dad's voice, and I've never heard him refer to Noughts as blankers before. Blankers? What a horrible word. A nasty word. My friend Callum wasn't a blanker. He wasn't. The Liberation Militia are growing impatient with the rate of change in this country. They want. And just who are they? Dad demanded. Who's the head of the Liberation Militia? I don't know, sir. It's been a slow business working my way up the ranks, and the Liberation Militia are very careful. Each military group is divided into different cells or units with multiple drop-off points if they want to communicate with others in the militia. It's very hard to find out who's in charge.
I don't want excuses. Just do it. That's what I'm paying you for. I'm not going to lose my place in the government because of some terrorist rabble-rousers. They call themselves freedom fighters, Dad's guest stated. I don't care if they call themselves descendants of the angel Shaka. They're scum. And I want them wiped out. All of them. Silence. I'll keep working on it. Dad's derisive snort was the only reply the other man got. Sir, about these meetings, they're becoming more and more dangerous. We should find a better way to communicate. I still want these face-to-face meetings at least once a month, but it's not safe. The man with Dad protested. I'm putting my life on the line every time.
I don't want to hear it. You can email me or phone as often as you like, but I want to see you at least once a month. Is that understood? Dad snapped. At first I thought the other man wasn't going to answer, but at last he said, yes, sir. I tiptoed closer to the drawing room. Who was Dad talking to? I could only hear their voices. Blanca's going to my daughter's school. I could almost hear Dad shaking his head. If my plan doesn't work, it'll take a miracle to get re-elected next year. I'll be crucified. There are only 3 or 4 going to Heathcroft, aren't there? The other man asked. That's 3 or 4 more than I thought would pass the entrance exam, Dad said with disgust. If I thought any of them stood a chance of passing the test, I would never have amended the education bill in the first place. Every word was like a poison dart. An icy shiver shot through me, and it was like my heart was being ripped apart. It was so hurt. Dad. My dad.
Less than 24 Noughts are going to cross schools nationwide. That's not so many, surely, the other man pointed out. When I want your point of view, I'll buy it, Dad dismissed. Did he even know that Callum was one of the Noughts going to my school? Did he even care? I doubted it. I took another tentative step forward. I glanced across the hall. Dad's reflection was clearly visible in the long hall mirror opposite the drawing room. I could only see the back of Dad's guest reflected in the mirror as he had his back to the door, but I was more than a little stunned to see it was a Nought. He had blonde hair, tied back in a ponytail, and he was wearing a stained sheepskin coat and big brown boots, with a silver-coloured chain above the heel of each one. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen a Nought in our house, except in the kitchen or cleaning. Why was he here? Who was he? It didn't make any sense. Nothing they were saying made any sense.
I took another step forward, my eyes still focused on the mirror across from the drawing room, which was my mistake. I tripped over the telephone cord, making the phone drag slightly across the table. It wasn't much of a noise, but it was enough. Dad looked around and saw me via the hall mirror, just as I could see him. His guest turned around. "Sephy, go to bed now." Dad didn't even wait for me to leave before he slammed the drawing room door shut. I'd barely gathered my scattered wits when the door opened again and Dad marched out alone, slamming the door shut behind him. "What did you see?" he demanded as he strode over to me. Pardon? What did you see?" Dad grasped my shoulders. A drop of spit came out of his mouth and landed on my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. Nothing. "What did you hear?" "Nothing, Dad. I just came down for a drink. I'm thirsty."
Dad's eyes blazed with rage as he scowled at me. He looked like he wanted to hit me. "I didn't see or hear anything, honest." Long moments passed before Dad's grip on my shoulders slowly slackened off. His contorted face relaxed. "Can I get my drink now?" "Go on then, just hurry up." I walked off towards the kitchen, even though I wasn't thirsty anymore. My heart was slamming against my ribs, and my blood was roaring in my ears. I knew, without turning around, that Dad was still watching me. Once I reached the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water and headed back up to my bedroom. I was out of Dad's sight in the kitchen, but I still went at a normal pace, as if somehow he could see me through the walls. I left the kitchen and started to head upstairs, my glass of water in my hand. "Princess, wait," Dad called me back. I turned my head. "I'm sorry I bit your head off." Dad forced a smile as he came up the stairs behind me. "I've been a bit edgy all day." That's okay," I whispered. "You're still my princess, aren't you?" asked Dad, hugging me. I nodded, trying to get past the lump in my throat, trying not to spill my water. "Off you go to bed then." I carried on walking up the stairs, my pace carefully careless, and Dad stood in the hall, watching my every move.
I tipped everything out of my school bag and onto my bottom bunk bed for the umpteenth time. Ruler, pencil case, pens, pencils, exercise book, calculator. I went through the list Heathcroft High had sent to me, my mum and dad. I had everything they'd specified, and yet it still felt as if there was something missing, as if it wasn't enough. I took the corner of my bed sheet and rubbed it over the calculator again. No amount of polishing would ever make this dinosaur calculator look brand new. I rubbed my hand over my tired eyes. Don't be so ungrateful. At least you've got a calculator. Just keep telling yourself that, Callum. Slowly, carefully, I started packing all of my school stuff into my bag. I'm lucky, I'm lucky, I'm lucky. I'm going to school. I played that one thought over and over again in my head, scared to let it go in case of what might happen. Someone knocked at my door. It was either Mum or Lynette. Jude didn't knock. She just barged straight in, and Dad never came into our room. If he wanted to talk to me, he'd always call me out to the landing. I hoped it was Lynette.
Mum popped her head around the door. "Can I come in?" I shrugged, placing my calculator on top of the other stuff in my bag. Mum came into the room, carefully shutting the door behind her. I could guess what was about to come next. She sat on my bed, picked up my school bag and immediately emptied everything out. Very carefully, Mum started packing all my stuff back. Moments passed before she spoke. "I just wanted to say that whatever happens tomorrow, well done for getting into Heathcroft High." That I hadn't expected. I stared at her. "What do you mean, whatever happens tomorrow?" "Nothing." Mum's smile wobbled before disappearing altogether. "It's just that I want you to be happy." "I am happy," I frowned.
"I don't want to see you upset. I don't want you to get hurt." What on earth was she talking about? "Mum, I'm only going to school. I'm not going into the army." Mum's attempt at a smile was back. "I know, but I think you and your father are underestimating how much of a challenge it's going to be. I don't want to see you upset. Besides which, well, we've heard some rumours." "What kind of rumours?" "Some of the Crosses aren't happy about Noughts going to their schools. We've heard rumours that some of them are determined to cause trouble. So no matter what happens, don't let yourself be provoked into lashing out. Don't give them a reason to kick you out. Is that what you've been worrying about? Mum didn't reply. Don't worry, I told her. I've gone to Heathcroft now, and nothing, not even dynamite, is going to get me out again.
I looked out of the car window, watching the trees and fields and sky melt and merge into each other in a passing blur. The first day of term, I sat up straighter and a smile of pure happiness creeping across my face. Callum. He alone made the first day of term new and exciting and different. Okay back there, Miss Sephy? Fine, thanks, Harry. I directed my smile at our Nought driver. He was watching me via the driver's interior mirror. Nervous? I laughed. Are you kidding? I guess not, Harry replied ruefully. Harry, could you drop me? Off around the corner from school, Harry finished for me. If that's okay. Well, it'll have to be, won't it? Harry shook his head. If your mother finds out. She won't. I still don't see... I sighed. During term time, Harry and I had this conversation at least 3 times a week. Harry, you know how I get teased if my friends see you driving me. I get all kinds of comments about having feet which are too precious to touch the pavement, or I get asked when I'm going to have my wings fitted and all sorts. I'm not in the mood to be teased, not on my first day back. I know, but please. Oh, all right then. Thanks, Harry. If I get into trouble, you won't, I promise. I smiled.
Harry turned into Cherrywood Grove, a couple of streets away from the Heathcroft, my school. I hopped out, dragging my school bag off the white leather seat. See you later. Yes, Miss Sephy. I waited until Harry had driven off and was out of sight before taking a step. He caught me out like this before, pretending to drive off and then doubling back when my back was turned. As I ambled along, I heard a strange rumbling sound, like someone playing a radio really loudly, but far enough away so that I couldn't make out exactly what was being said. As I approached the corner, shouts like an angry wave rolled up towards me. But even that couldn't prepare me for what was about to happen next. I turned the corner and...
At the far end of the road, there was a huge crowd outside my school, and they were shouting and chanting. I froze for a moment, then I started to walk towards them, then I started to run. What on earth was going on? It didn't take me long to find out. No blankers in our school! No blankers in our school! The slogan was shouted out over and over again. Callum and 3 other Noughts were surrounded by police officers who were trying to push their way through the crowd to get to the school entrance. More police stood in an arm-length line trying to push the crowd of crosses back into 2 orderly groups. I ran faster, but the closer I got, the less I could see. I pushed and elbowed my way through the crowd. Callum! Callum! No blankers in our school! The police officers were still trying to push through the crowds of adults and Heathcroft pupils, who in turn were determined not to let them pass. Blankers out!
I forced my way up the steps to the school entrance, ahead of the crowd and the police, watching as the police battled to hold back the crowd, watching as Callum and the others looked neither to the right nor the left, but straight ahead without even blinking. No blankers in our school. I spotted Juliana and Adam and Ezra in the crowd, all of whom were my good friends. But worst of all, I saw my own sister Minnie in the crowd, and she was shouting just as hard as all the others. No blankers in our school. There was a roaring in my head which matched the roaring all around me. I was in the middle of chaos. Callum and the other Noughts tried to make their way up the steps to the school entrance. The crowd surged forward at that. The palpable wave of their anger hit me almost like a punch. Suddenly a cry went up. Callum's head dipped down, followed by the heads of the police officers. One of them is hurt.
Callum? It wasn't Callum, was it? A blanker's hurt. The news spread through the crowd like a virulent disease. Hooray! Spontaneous cheers filled the air. The police lines trying to hold the crowds back were knocked to the ground as the crowd rushed forward like air into a vacuum. I was on the very top step looking down at it all, and I've never felt such fist-clenching, teeth-gritting fury. A policewoman stepped to one side and I saw Callum squatting down by a naught girl who looked like she was in a bad way. Blood trickled from her forehead and her eyes were closed. Mr. Corser, the headmaster, emerged from behind me. He stared at the crowd, the mob before him, looking shocked and ashen. "Mr. Corser, we have to help that girl," I pointed. "She's hurt." Mr. Corser didn't move, even when I repeated what I just said. I was caught up in a hurricane with all the noise and madness whirling around me until my head was about to explode. "Stop it! Just stop it!" Nothing. "Stop it! You're all behaving like animals!" I shouted so hard my throat immediately began to hurt. "Worse than animals! Like blankers!" The sounds of the crowd slowly died away. "Just look at you," I continued. "Stop it!" I glanced down at Callum. He was staring at me, the strange expression on his face. "Callum, don't look at me like that. I didn't mean you. I'd never mean you. It was just for the others, to get them to stop, to get them to help. I didn't mean you."
She didn't say that. She couldn't have. Not Sephy. I'm going to wake up in a moment. Wake up from this chaos, this nightmare. Wake up and laugh, or bawl, at the tricks my mind's playing. She didn't say that, but she did. I'm not a blanker. I may be a naught, but I'm worth more than nothing. I'm not a blanker, a waste of time and space, a zero. I'm not a blanker. I am not a blanker. Sephy. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed. Mallory Blackman once said that reading is an exercise in empathy, an exercise in walking in someone else's shoes for a while. This is clear in her book, Noughts and Crosses. Its message clearly conveys the importance of being kind to one another and to keep getting back up after life knocks you down. These messages are more important now than ever. If you want to find out more about Mallory Blackman's Noughts and Crosses, then please ask your English or humanities teacher.
It was just for the others, to get them to stop, to get them to help. I didn't mean you.
All kinds of comments about having feet which are too precious to touch the pavement, or I get asked when I'm not.
Callum. It wasn't Callum, was it? A blanker's hurt. The news spread through the cloud. Oh, sorry.
How should I take it?
I moved the cursor over to shut down and clicked yawn in as I waited for my PC to switch off. It seemed to be taking forever tonight. At last, there was a clank and the screen went black. I can't do it. I can't purposely.
Hi everyone, as it's World Book Day today, a couple of members of staff from around school have got together to create a video reading extracts from Mallory Go. She didn't say that. She couldn't.